Hello and welcome to or back to my channel. Today I'm talking about 14 books that I think high schoolers should read before they graduate. So just a bit about myself. I am currently 19 years old. I just started college this past year and I have been doing a lot of reflecting throughout my high school years and now to think about what books I would recommend for high schoolers. I've read a lot of books and I think these books are ones that are hard-hitting and have a lot of important themes and messages that I think high schoolers should read before they graduate, because they honestly have changed the way I think. I think they've made me into a better person, and that's why I'm recommending them. I won't say that these books are necessarily like fun reads, but they are definitely hard-hitting. These recommendations are more, in my opinion, to read more books that will make you think deeply and get you ready for the next step in life so you can be like a more conscientious person, in my opinion. So I'll just dive in. So up first, we have The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This book is told in a series of letters, we don't know to who, and it's from this boy who is in 9th grade in high school that mostly feels pretty lonely, and he gets in with these high school seniors and it's just about him, but there's also a lot of hidden meaning. I don't know if you've seen like parts of the movie, but I think the book is definitely worth reading. And with all of these and this, please check the trigger warnings. Next up, I have Fahrenheit 451. I read this twice, once for class and once on my own. I read it for fun first, and then my teacher was like, hey, we're reading this for class, so I ended up picking it up again. In this dystopian world, they have to burn books, essentially. And I think it's just really important to read it just to see how important books and thinking and stories are to our culture, because you don't think stuff like this could happen, but it does, and that's really scary, and I think it's really important to read these books to prevent stuff like this from happening. Then I have Speak by Lori Halls Anderson. This book is about sexual assault, so be wary of that if you pick it up. I think this topic is super important to read about, and especially if you haven't really been exposed to people who talk about this sort of stuff, it's really important to be aware that this happens. So I think it's really important to see the perspective of someone that has experienced it before you talk about your opinions on the matter. Next, we have Firekeeper's Daughter. I have this book, but I loaned it out to a friend. I think this is probably the most enjoyable book on this list if you read it. As per usual, be wary of the trigger warnings, but it has a lot of themes around like drug use and sexual assault and a lot of other stuff. This is also just a thriller, and it's really thrilling and really good. It's around 500 pages, but I read it super quickly, and I think it's an enjoyable read for high schoolers, but also really good just to be exposed to those thoughts. And it also has some Native American representation, which is not often shown in many books, especially not YA, and I think that's really important to be reading about also. Then I also have Nimona. Nimona is a graphic novel, and it has a lot of good versus evil themes. And I know it kind of looks like it's for little kids, but I also think there's a lot of deep meaning within it. There's also a movie. I'd argue the book is better as per usual, but the movie is also pretty enjoyable, but I think a lot of readers would find this very interesting. Next up, we have The Midnight Library. This is technically an adult book, but I think you can read it younger. Just there's one sex scene that's very minimal, so if you're uncomfortable with that, don't pick it up. But this is about a woman who dies, and she gets put into this library where you can basically go and live all your choices again. And so she goes back and she has like options of becoming like an Olympian or a singer and all that. And I just think it's really good to reflect upon. Like after I read it, I really thought about some of my own decisions in my life and how I wanted to go back and like redo some of those. And you can't do that, but you can go to the present and work on those things that you want to work on still. Like, I used to play piano a lot, and since I read this, I've picked up piano a lot more. I'm back in piano lessons, and I've learned a lot. So I think it's really made me more reflective, and I think it's just overall a really good book. We have The Hunger Games. You likely already know what The Hunger Games is about. A bunch of kids are sent to kill each other, but this is also a critique on society, and the older I get, the better this book really gets, because I start to think about it more and I'm like, wow, it's just fantastic. So I think everyone should read it. We have another classic. This is Walden. I read some of this in high school with a teacher, and she explained a lot of the meanings. I'm not necessarily saying that you should read this whole book, but I think you should definitely look up some of the themes, because a lot of them are just fantastic in my opinion. Like, the main thought that I took away from this is there's this idea that people work their whole lives so they can get to their retirement. But by the time you're in retirement, your body's old. You're not going to have the energy to do those things. And I think that really inspired me to start thinking about life and living it in the fullest now. And there's tons of good ideas in this book. I'd recommend just looking up a little bit more about it or seeing some summaries online, because a lot of this theory has really changed the way I think. Next, we have The Bell Jar. This is my favorite classic book. It's about a girl who's a writer, and she also is kind of depressed, and it's just a lot. But if you're a creative person, or if you've experienced stuff like this, it really makes you feel seen in a lot of ways. This also changed the way that I write my own stories. If you're a writer, the way that Sylvia Plath writes is just amazing, and I think it's definitely worth picking up. Next up, we have Solitaire by Alice Oseman. This book is about a girl who mostly keeps to herself, and then she meets this guy, and that changes everything. It's not a romance novel at all. I mean, you can see it on the cover. It says this is not a love story, but it's very impactful and has a lot of things that I think a lot of high schoolers really feel inside, like just trying to figure out yourself. And this really impacted me growing up, and I really hope that others can also find it and read it. This book is Exit Pursued by a Bear. This is another book that deals with a lot of sexual assault within it, so there are some triggers with that. It really changed my perspective on thinking about sexual assault, and also, I don't know, just when you read about it from the perspective of someone who's gone through it, it really impacts you, and this book has really stayed with me ever since I read it. So I think a lot of high schoolers would really benefit from also picking it up. Probably on the older end of high school though. This is Katzenjammer by Francesca Zappia. This is a horror novel, so there's a lot of triggers within it, but it's about these students who are trapped in a school. And I'm convinced that I could read this like 100 times and find new meaning in it every single time. I think this is one of the most unique books I've ever read. It is truly remarkable, and there's also illustrations throughout the whole thing, and I think that's amazing. The author illustrates it herself, and let me see if I can find one. Like, there's that. It's just really good. I have a signed copy, which is one of the coolest things ever, because this is one of my favorite authors that I've ever read from. And I have a few of her books that are signed, and it's just amazing. I highly, highly recommend it. We have Heroine. It's about drug use. She gets, if I remember correctly, in a sports injury, and they prescribe her opioids because she needs it in order to not be in so much pain. But then she gets addicted to it. And I never read a book, especially not a YA book, about drug use before. And I think it really impacted the way I thought about drug use, and it has inspired me to really do a lot more research and think about it way differently than I would have before. And I think every high schooler should read this. I know some people might look at these books and think, oh, a high schooler shouldn't read these things. Like, these are really like difficult topics to process, but high schoolers are already living in these realities. So if they're not protected, then we should at least educate them on this, because education on these topics is so much more important than just going in blind. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about book banning. I'm sure a lot of these books are banned. So, I don't know. Please read this book. I think this is one of the most important ones on this list. Then the final book I have is The Poet X. I read this in high school, and then I read it once again in college class. And it's a novel in verse. So it's really short, but it reads like a novel still. So like all these pages are like that. And it tells a story about a girl who has really strict parents, and they're also religious, and she falls in love with this guy, and her mom doesn't approve whatsoever. But it's also about a lot more than that. This made me feel so many things growing up, and it also made me feel it once again once I was a little bit older. And I think if you've ever grown up with strict parents or religious parents, you will feel this novel so much. That is all of my book recommendations for high schoolers. I hope that you read them, and if you have any questions about further like trigger warnings, I can always reply to your comments. But I think people should really pick these up. The reason I'm recommending them isn't because I'm like, oh, these are like 5-star books, you're gonna enjoy everyone. To be honest, you probably won't enjoy everyone. I think a lot of these are going to hurt a lot when you read them, and they're also going to make you think. But I think in high school that is so important. People have a responsibility when you get older where you need to stay educated on these things, and if you don't, then there really isn't any consequences to that in our world. I think staying educated is one of the best things you can do as a person, and also as a student, and just as a member of society. So I recommend these books to you if you're a high schooler, or honestly if you're older too. I think these books can make just such a big impact. But I genuinely do hope you pick them up, and I hope you find these recommendations useful. They definitely changed me, and I think that I've been made a better person because of the reading I do. So thank you for watching. If you want more videos like these, I guess you can subscribe. I don't know if I'll have another recommendation list like this because I recommended them all just now, but I do other book videos, just not quite as serious ones as this. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you have any ideas for videos, or if you want to see more from me. If not, you don't have to comment either, but thank you for watching. If you want, you can subscribe, like, whatever. It's up to you. Freedom of choice. But yeah, I guess I'll see you around. Bye.